revolution, which was initiated by the prophets, who fought for the liberation of man from the servitude of other men. So when that becomes a principle, La ilaha illallah, that absolute sovereignty belongs to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, man becomes, man is not the servant of anyone else. This is, freedom. And this is the basis upon which he presents his model of governance. So here, neither any individual, nor any class, nor any group has sovereignty over human beings. And so as a result, he has this concept of khilafat al-insan wa shahadat al-anbiya, the trusteeship of human beings and the witness of prophets. So these two roles are combined in the time of the prophets and the infallible imams in their role. But in the absence of Allah's designate on the earth, or His explicit appointee, so either the prophet or the imam, what do we do? So here, Sayyid al-Shaheed again believes in this concept of khilafat al-insan, that human beings have authority to regulate and conduct their affairs, but this is done within the limits of Allah's laws. And this is where the shahadat al-anbiya comes, where the witness of the prophets, a role which is now basically assumed by the ulama. Now in terms of his economic models, Sayyid al-Sadr's argument is for a model that is neither capitalistic nor socialist. It is not either unrestricted freedom that we find in capitalism, or the seizing of all liberties that we find in socialism, but one that allows for economic freedom within the limits of social justice, mutual responsibility, and balance. And hence it is marked by a realistic outlook of human tendencies coupled with the emphasis on morality. So this was, a very quick snapshot, and this was his ijtihad. Even in terms of ijtihad, he had a very radical reconception, whereby, by and large, he observed that in the field of ijtihad, the ulama would focus on the level of the individual. And he saw in Islam as a complete way of life that applied not just to individuals, but to societies at whole, but to society as well. And so when you pick up, for instance, a risala, and you look at through the laws, all of the laws pertain to individuals by and large. Ibadat, in terms of their prayer and worship, right? But also in terms of the mu'amalat, marriage, right? Inheritance. All of these have been catered towards the individual level. And he saw that, again, this is the one-dimensional thinking, which is his term. The two-dimensional thinking considers not just the level of the individual, but the level of society as well. And so it's a complete, almost re-look at the sources, in terms of not just the literal connotation of the Quran or the Hadith, but also what is their social context and what is the social circumstances in which they were revealed. So an example, and just to give an example of this, is the banking system, which is based on usury. And this is part of the socio-economical actuality of today. Banking system that is based on usury and interest. Now the jurists, by and large, what they would do is that they realize that Muslims are facing this difficulty, and they look for finding a lawful means of curtailing the restrictions within the existing system, right? How do I get a mortgage? Am I able to deposit in a bank, right? But the Sayyid al-Shaheed says, and I quote, actually, the jurist should have realized that the real problem is the interest banking system itself, and that is a social problem. So he sees that, that the ijtihad cannot be done simply at the level of the individual. It must be done also at the level of society. That you may have addressed something for the individual, but the problem may still persist for society. And so, as a result of this, you find that the arena of ijtihad expands considerably into such things as politics, economics, medical ethics, environmental ethics. All of these become arenas for fatwa and ijtihad. And he begun that process of thinking, applying ijtihad to the social realm, which is immense contribution. It's a radical reconception of ijtihad. And this is what comes to, the often understood model of the Council of Maraja. Often people say, Sayyid al-Sadr espouses this view of a Council of Maraja. Why? Because when ijtihad applies to this vast arena that touches on all aspects of life, no one individual can be an expert in everything. And so, when you have expertise focused on individuals who gained that expertise, he believed that as opposed to having an individual marja'iyah, that this should become an institution of marja'iyah. And so again, this is the beautiful mind of his, which was fairly independent. Now, I've spoken by and large on Sayyid al-Shaheed, Muhammad Baqir al-Sadr, and I'll just maybe end by just saying a little bit about his virtuous sister, Amina Sadr, Bint al-Huda, which, I find that she is often neglected, completely ignored. That a lot of these programs haven't given her justice either. And her concern too was a concern of the society, and for society to turn itself toward the ideal. Some of her greatest contributions, as an educator, as a mover, was realizing the cultural imperialism that began to infiltrate the Muslim lands, whereby women began to have an identity crisis, and were influenced by alien cultures and principles or values. And so she created this spark of reawakening and awareness, where the Muslim woman would be a woman who saw in herself this dignity and value in the ideal principles which she stood for. And so, she has a remarkable statement. It's just quite profound, where she says, and I think this is truly applies to her as well, "It shall not be that time will leave its imprints on me, but it is I who shall leave my imprints on time." And so, the march must continue. We should not just, again, look at these great figures as icons, but to study their thoughts and to advance their thoughts. The Quran says, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, وَمَا مُحَمَّدٌ إِلَّا رَسُولٌ قَدْ خَلَلْ مِنْ قَبْلِهِ الرُّسُلُ أَفَإِنْ مَاتَ أَوْ قُتِلَ أَنْقَلَبْتُمْ عَنْ أَعْقَابِكُمْ. If the Prophet ﷺ was a messenger, and other messengers preceded him, if he dies or is killed, will you then turn on your back? So the messenger dies, but the message lives. the message will always live. The march goes on. And so the Sayyid al-Shaheed, Muhammad Baqir al-Sadr, and Shaheeda bint al-Huda Amina al-Sadr have died, but their legacy continues, because that legacy is enshrined within the message of Islam, which is universal and timeless. And this is why, don't consider those who are slain in the way of Allah to be dead. They are alive. They are with their Lord, gaining sustenance. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.